here's my thing. As an editor, contrary to popular opinion, I like the editing for most of this movie. There are several moments, and maybe in the edit I'll point them out. It's hard to point them out.
Isn't it also the point of editing to not notice the editing?
Yeah,
too?
as I laid out in the last episode, I'm like, editing should be invisible, depending on what the scene is, because every single movie ever, the whole point of editing, and this is why I really don't like single take movies, editing is like music. There's a rhythm to it. There's a feel to it. If an edit feels good, you keep it. If it's jarring, you don't want that, unless you do want it to be jarring. And that's the point. It just like music, somebody might say, oh, that note was off or that tuning is bad. And sometimes it's like, yeah, that's the point. In that moment, you're supposed to feel this way, right? So editing is a tool. Now, it is frantic, but it's only frantic at frantic moments. Yeah. So you can make the case that it is all on purpose. That's the thing about movies. It's not like you edit it on the fly. There's not somebody in the back of the theater editing it real quick. You can perfect it, you can make it the way you want, and then you put it out into the world. So everything they do is motivated. The question then is, does that work? So the moments where it doesn't work for me specifically are, and again, this is where Forster shows that he's not a dumb dude. He very much on purpose has that first, not the opening action scene, but the first real action scene is that chase with Mitchell, where they're doing some parallel cutting between a horse race and Bond chasing this guy. Obvious parallel, right? But they do it so much to the point where you're like, I got it, right? And then even after they get away from the racetrack, they still cut back. Maybe one more time they cut back.
They cut back. It's almost like they have to cut back because he's shooting at the civilians. And like in any other Bond movie, we wouldn't give a shit. We're like, okay, whatever. Yeah, obviously that sucks. Like you'd see it real quick and you're like, okay, I got it. But then the movie wants us to, it's like the movie's trying to tell us like, no, we need to care about the civilians in the movie as well. So it's just like, I don't need you to cut back to that. I don't need that.
I think we could have seen the lady get hit and then nothing else, but I think we do get maybe one or two other cuts of people like, ugh.
So it's been about 30 seconds since we saw that lady get shot, and so here we are chasing, and then we cut back to the crowd, and we see the woman fall again. We've already seen her fall, so it's just in a movie that's trying to be really tight, it throws in some stuff like that, which is completely unnecessary. And then the second time that they do that fun parallel thing is obviously at the Tosca play, where what's happening in the play is kind of being mirrored in what's happening with Bond, who's having a shootout. So it's kind of, again, to put on that snooty hat, we have this clever cross-cutting between Bond and a parallel action, some climactic shooting in the Tosca opera that's symbolic of the many executing the one. I mean, again, this is a Spectre movie, right? Quantum is Spectre.
Yeah.
So all these guys killing this one guy, meanwhile Bond is having a shootout with the same amount of guys, right? So it's smart. But then they keep cutting to another part of the play where this woman is stabbing this man. And again, to keep that snooty hat on, the only parallel you can draw is that Bond constantly has Vesper's betrayal on his mind. So you can be like, oh, there's meaning to that. But in the moment, it's so unnecessary. And it just pulls us away from Bond to where, that's what I mean. It's like they do some intelligent editing that's meaningful, but then they take it one step too far. It's elegant and beautiful, but it's like, it's
like trying to be artsy, but then it like goes too far and you're like, all right, I get it.
It's not sickening to me, but again, contrary to popular opinion, I like the editing for most of the movie, but recognize that there are several moments where they take it too far because it confuses what's happening. Sometimes maybe on purpose they do this to cover up a mistake, right? But it never becomes Liam Neeson jumping a fence. It never reaches that embarrassing point. Yeah.
It's not like I've never noticed bad editing before, but nothing in this movie sticks out that badly to me.
They also played with the editing in movies like Secret Service, right? They did a lot of jump cutting there for effect. Die Another Day, another example where they were really getting experimental with the editing, trying to pretend that they were like a Fast and Furious movie or whatever. But that's not what killed those movies, right? Specifically, that's not what killed those movies. It's more story stuff. My point being, editing for effect is not a new thing. And the editing may not be your cup of tea, but it doesn't kill this movie. It's like, you may not like it, but it does not kill this movie. And most of the time I like it. So let's go through each action scene. The 4 elements and then some, right?
There's a lot of action scenes, which I am good with.
A lot of action scenes. It's kind of similar to GoldenEye's successor did the same thing, right? 2 great movies, Casino and GoldenEye. Tomorrow Never Dies, they did it because I don't think they really knew, they didn't really have too much of a story, so they fell back on action. This, they had a writer's strike, so they also fell back on action. You know, so again, like Live and Let Die. What do we do? What do we do? I don't know. Just start a chase scene, quick, to fill in 20 minutes. So the opener, I'm all about it. I'm all about that opener. I can follow the action. And again, as an editor, I like fast cutting. I don't like it to be cutty, but I like fast cutting for effect. And I also don't like wasting time. I mean, the number one thing I ever hear back on my editing is, yeah, it cut too fast. It was too cutty. And I'm always like, shut up. How did it feel? You know, so I think that opener is great. I have no problems with the opener.
I disagree, but that's
Go ahead.
That's my thing with the opener is that as I'm watching, there are moments where I'm like, I'm okay with how choppy the edit is. I know that they're editing to give you a feeling of chaoticness, but at the same time, it being a Bond movie, I would appreciated a little bit more clarity as to what is at stake here. And I feel like it's a lot of just like, we're in the moment of craziness and this is all happening. And you're almost like, it's almost like you're a witness to something if you were just a bystander watching it rather than being in the moment with Bond. I don't completely hate it. Like there's moments where I'm like, okay, I'm okay with it. But then there are moments where I'm like, you know, him getting hit with the truck that runs right back into him. And that happens so quick that I feel like it could have used some, you could breathe a little bit there. And then it's like, oh, he's almost dead. Oh no, he gets right out of it. It's not a big deal. And that's where the edit on some of that scene I think could have used a little bit more breathing room. And I do think part of it is they wanted to make that first scene really short because obviously he wanted this movie to be, you know, bare bones, very quick, very fast. Yep. And I can see that's probably what his thought process was on that first scene.
I love that whole opening scene. For me, the quick cutting in that scene is representative of how fast Bond has to make decisions while driving at a high speed, and just exemplifies that he's a really good driver. And then we do get the reason he's trying to escape later on when he opens the trunk
we do.
And we see Mr. White.
It's time to get out.
Sometimes I want to feel moments as much as I want things to be fast.
I think you're both right. I think Nance is correct in everything he just said. I think that the mantra of the editing could be, well, there could be some breathing room, but that just becomes like this shot, that shot. Where I disagree with you, McCurdy, is that opening is not about stakes. It's not about caring about the who, what, where, and why. It's just getting us into kind of asking the question of what's happening, because there's that payoff. It's a half joke, half payoff of that trunk opening up, and it's like, holy shit, Mr. White was in there the whole time. Like, he must have a concussion at this point. And that's the payoff. Oh, that's what the stakes were. And I think that's rock solid coming after Casino. You know, just getting right into it, because we don't know what's going on. We don't know Mr. White's back there. We don't know why Bond is being chased. Oh, boom, off and running. So you can go ahead and nitpick, like, this shot should have been longer. This little moment should have been longer.
I'm not even saying the nitpicks of the specific shots, but for me, it's like it could have used
stakes.
Yeah, it could have used some stakes. It could have used some
stakes. But it didn't need, my point is it didn't need stakes. My point is that it pays off.
Bond is trying to get away. That's all you need to know.
Exactly. The what is going on is paid off. And then retroactively, oh, that's what the stakes were. As opposed to like, hold on, Mr. White, I'm gonna turn now.
No, I mean, obviously we're not gonna get that, but
they did that on purpose. That was intentionally done. We already talked about the problems with the horse race chase. Overall, it's fine, but just like the handcuff chase in Tomorrow Never Dies, I don't understand the motivation behind the chase. I don't really understand why it's happening. What I'm talking about is at the outset, right? Let me lay out the scene. So Mitchell,
hello, Mitchell.
Bond, who's M's bodyguard, is standing there with another bodyguard or guard, and then Bond. So you have 3 guards.
We're guards. We're guards. Oh, we're guards. We're guards.
3 men, Mr. White, and M, right? And Mr. White does the whole, we have people everywhere.
We have people everywhere. Am I right?
And then Mitchell shoots guy number 2, right? So now it's just Mitchell and Bond. I probably rewound it maybe a dozen times, and I'm like, what is happening? Mitchell shoots guy. M like collapses. It almost looks like M got shot, but she didn't get shot. It's like she faints in a way. She just falls.
He shoots at M and misses, but he hits like the pole that she's standing next to, which I'm thinking is a pole that's holding like a saline bag for Mr. White.
It's like a medical pole.
And she like...
So, and she kind of like buckles a little bit. And then Bond throws a chair. Like those are the times where it's almost like they're covering up for maybe they didn't get certain shots. So they just make it all frantic. So you don't know what the hell's going on. There are pockets where it's like, what the hell just happened? That was unclear. But then that goes away. My ultimate point, though, is that Bond and Mitchell have a little scuffle. Mitchell grabs a gun. And instead of turning around and pointing the gun at Bond and saying, freeze, I'm going to kill you and then take Mr. White with me, Mitchell starts running away. Why does Mitchell start running away?
He just knows Bond is that awesome.
There was no reason. The horse race. That's why the horse race is in there. He wanted to see the horses.
Wait, I put some money on this.
He's like, this whole interrogation scene has taken too long. I want to see.
No, I'm not an agent of quantum. I just want to get out of here to go.
I just want to see the horse races.
But you know what I mean? It was like an unmotivated chase because I don't understand why Mitchell is running away instead of trying to kill Bond to then take Mr. White.
It's not like Bond has an upper hand in this space. Yeah. Well, unless he's trying to get away because he knows that like someone's gonna call somebody from
when Bond comes back, Mr. White is gone. So it's like, okay, somebody was coming, but that doesn't really answer my question, which is Mitchell had the upper hand. Why did he suddenly run? I mean, M runs away because M's like, I'm getting the out of here. But why did Mitchell run away?
Charlie, you didn't know this. His character's actually the brother of the woman in the beginning of World Is Not Enough who's in the boat.
I don't understand this.
Because the world is not enough. Yeah, and the world is not enough. The boat chase that doesn't need to happen, and you're like, why?
This whole family exists to interrupt and unmotivate various chase scenes through Bond. So, okay, and that's what I mean. Like, I think the scaffold fight, I actually really love the scaffold fight.
It's cool.
Yeah,
the scaffold chase cool. To get there.
They have all this really cool stuff and them, like, running through the sewers that they just kind of, like, breeze over with horse racing.
For me, it just shows how brutish James Bond is.
Yeah.
He just jumps off of roofs and hits walls and jumps onto a moving bus.
No doubt. And all that stuff is great. I love all that stuff. And I'm not going to nitpick too much cutting to the race because I see what they're trying to do. But I mean, for me, I don't care about that stuff so much as I care about that moment when Mitchell first starts shooting. And it's like, wait, the chair got thrown and what's happening? If I'm saying what is happening, that's not so good. If there's a moment where, I mean, because remember back in Casino,
sometimes
they remember when they flash when the bent station chief gets shot and they do the flash frames of the family. Like somebody could be, that was too quick. That was too. No. That was for a purpose. That was almost to give you this subconscious feeling, right? People can really sometimes obnoxiously nitpick editing if they're looking for it. Like Nans, you're not looking for it, so you're not thinking. I'm not talking about McCurdy. I'm talking about people in general. If they're looking for a problem, they will find it. But for me, it only becomes a problem if I'm asking, wait, what just happened? Then it is a problem. So anyway, because the scaffolding...
It's a lot easier to see what's happening in the scaffolding portion than it is in that right before the chase starts portion. Like you said, you had to watch it several times. Like, oh, did M get hit? No, okay.
Yeah. The scaffolding suddenly goes just as frantic, but it's great. And it has a fantastic ending. That is a fantastic ending to the scaffold fight. The next one is the hotel room fight, which I think is perfect, brutal, brief, and clear.
It's their answer to like, oh, we're like the Bourne franchise now. We're going to do a Bourne fight in this movie.
It almost seems like Bond doesn't try to not kill him, though. He just like goes and kills him.
And that was like,
shouldn't have killed him.
Yeah, it's a point of contention with him. It's like, you just let him die. You didn't question him.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that Bond is like, I'm going to go in there and kill this guy. And if this guy looks at me wrong, I'm going to kill him. It's more like Bond keeps killing because he has to, but he also don't give a f***. Like, he also is just like, this guy f***s with me for 1 second, I'm just going to put him down. Yeah. So it's kind of half and half.
Because he's pissed about Vesper.
Yeah, it's like, he's pissed about Vesper, but he's also doing his job, and then there's M who thinks that everything is motivated by Vesper, so M is constantly on his ass.
I need to know that I can trust you.
You don't have to worry about me.
She's constantly checking in with him, and he's like, no, I'm just trying to do my job. She's like, I don't know if I really believe you.
I need you to come in and debrief.
I don't have time.
Bond, you killed a man in Brigands.
I did my best not to.
You shot him at point blank and threw him off a roof. I'd hardly call that showing restraint.
So it's kind of complicated in that, where it's not always one way or the other.
You said you weren't motivated by revenge.
I'm motivated by my duty.
No. I think you're so blinded by inconsolable rage that you don't care who you hurt.
But at the end of the day, he's just like, you know what? F it. You're dead. He's like, I'm going to walk into this hotel room and talk to this guy. Oh, no, f you. You're dead. And I think that one's perfect. Now, the boat chase.
The boat chase is pretty bad, actually.
It's fine.
What's bad about it?
The main thing is that you don't really get a sense of geography. You don't get a sense of where they're at, who's chasing who. There's times when we just get shots of just water spraying up, but not really seeing like, wait, which boat was that? Was that the bad guy's boat? Was that Bond's boat? I think people generally want to have clear geography when they see an action scene. And if you don't have that, I think that's when people are going to start complaining. And I know you guys are like, both of you guys are like, no, it's fine. I thought it was fine, whatever. But I think most people would say if I can't clearly understand where A and B and C are, they're going to get a little lost and they may not like it.
I don't think the boat scene is a problem. I think you understand that they are in a harbor. So there's boats all over the place, and I don't think you need to know any more than that.
There's one shot, there's one particular cut in this chase that I was like, why would you do that? Why would you cut there? All it is Bond falls from the controls of the boat and then gets back up to get the controls. That's it. That's the shot, but it literally
kind of pointless.
They cut in the middle of that action to another take of him doing that. And I'm like, you could have just used the one cut. You don't need that extra cut in there. And it's like little things like that where I'm like, that really stuck out to me.
If they're looking for a problem, they will find it.
And it bothered me for some reason.
Typically because, I mean, the motivation between using one shot or two is because of the energy.
Sure.
They do those because there is a rhythm, there is an energy to cuts. That's why, for me, I like the editing in this movie. When I say that, I'm not talking about the times where it goes a little too far or is unclear. But in general, I like the energy that comes about from cutting because it, just like music, there's a rhythm to it. So it naturally picks up in action scenes unless there's a reason not to. And I mean, even like take any movie and the cuts are going to increase on an action scene.
I just think that scene's not very clear. Compare that boat scene to any of the previous boat scenes we've seen. I think they're much better ones that are way more clear and don't rely so heavily on trying to do quick cuts to give energy. You need to orientate yourself. And if you're not doing that, then you're going to get lost in what you're looking at.
The word is orientation. When an editor is editing, they know what's happening. They've seen all the raw footage. Their job is to then communicate that to an audience. And if the audience ever goes, what just happened and where am I? That's where you've messed up. You need to be orienting things for the audience. But for me, again, I'm always going to be like, yeah, sure. You could have used a shot here or there to kind of pad it out. But for me, it's more at the end of the scene, the frantic cutting is, again, used to cut up a moment of something not being clear. So the final boat drives up on top of them. She gets knocked out. Bond sees a hook and some rope. So he throws the hook over the top onto the other boat. And then with no context to what the other side of the rope is doing, they just get ripped away. He doesn't throw an anchor over the side. He doesn't throw an other end of the rope onto another boat or anything. Again, it's like, maybe if we cut it fast enough, nobody will notice that what we just did doesn't make sense. A good example of this being in the beginning of A View to a Kill, Bond hijacks that little snowmobile thing, and he does it by throwing a hook into a ravine, and then he goes and hooks that to the guy, and then it rips him off. Like, okay, I know how Bond did that. It made contextual sense. Whereas with this, I'm like, you just threw a hook in there. That's not going to do anything. It's like in Batman when he flips the truck. Hook the truck, lampposts, hook it into the ground, truck flips. Okay, that made sense. But if he didn't do that, you'd be like, how did he flip the truck? You know, but that's what I mean. They cut it so quick to cover that, to cover up that zit. So anyway, the next one is the opera scene. Again, we have clever cross-cutting between Bond and parallel action. It's intentional. The like smorgasbord of shots is intentional and it's meant to say something. I just remember the first time I ever saw it being like, wait, what's happening? You know, because you're expecting a traditional shootout, and instead the sound goes away, and you're just getting all these visuals. And I'm fine with it up until they keep cutting to the play. What is that saying? Again, is that his subconscious feelings about Vesper betraying him? What's the point of that? You know? And so that's where I'm like, again, maybe a step too far, but nothing that really ever becomes Liam Neeson jumping the fence.
That one doesn't bother me as much. And I actually, that scene as a whole is probably like the one memorable thing I like about this movie, unfortunately.
I think the opera scene overall is great. The whole scene is great.
Yeah.
Can I offer an opinion? I really think you people should find a better place to meet.
The thing I like about the opera scene is like, that is what we should have been doing for Spectre if we were going to continue doing Spectre. If this was going to be the Spectre movie, if we didn't even say it was Quantum, which that is another thing I hate about this movie.
This is the Spectre movie. This is the Spectre movie.
I hate the fact that they call it Quantum, because they could have just saved it or not called the organization anything and just said our organization. And they just are like, no, we're going to call it Quantum because Quantum is Solace because audience dumb.
I don't know if it's dumb though. I think it's I think it's dumb. Secret societies are all like secret societies are a real thing, and they have like societies within societies. This is real world shit.
No, I get it, but it's less about like if you're going to restart your franchise and you have all these things that you know fans are going to like. I still to this day think, man, wouldn't that have been awesome if they didn't say what it was and then left it to another movie to fill in the holes of like, oh, just it was Spectre all along.
An organization.
And just knowing that Dominic Green, I mean, hell, they didn't have to call, okay, so say they didn't call it Quantum, right? Say they just called it the Green Project. Like, what's this Green Project that we are learning about and all the people that are attached to it? Like, they could have just called it that and then left it open to later. Like,
cool.
The Green, yeah, sure, but it's like
it's just not.
It's cool. Like, but it's again, it goes along with your theme of like something that is played out as something beautiful and something that seems like it's opening your arms and something that is good, but really, as you say, the devil would be doing that.
Yes, McCurdy, but that's the client-facing arm is the Green Project, but behind the scenes, it's Quantum. That's the devilry.
Right. And behind Quantum is Spectre.
Exactly.
Right, but they didn't have to name it that.
You have the 20/20 power of hindsight, which is
true. They
would have said Spectre if they could.
I think, yeah.
But they couldn't, so they thought it was always going to be Quantum. Once they get the rights back, they're like, Spectre is a pre-sold property, we're just going to switch it up. But again, I do think it works because in the real world, all these secret societies have secret societies within them, and they all interbreed, and they all have they all cross-connect and all that.
Are you in a secret society?
It's called Ranked.
Yeah, we're gonna rank the world.
Every country in the world is in danger.
But like, leave it open at least.
Them not saying it in Casino was good. They had to say it in this movie, because otherwise they just keep saying the organization or whatever. But the only thing I have a problem with, he finds the little earpiece thing, right? But he also finds a pin with a Q on it. The Quantum people have pins. Again, that's like my theme of the night, is like, I like all these things, and then they go one step too far, and I'm like, God damn it. But they don't take a giant leap.
There's times when Dominique is wearing that pin, and it's like, if you're going to do the Q, I think, okay, here's the thing. As a fan stepping back from not being Snooty Hat or looking at the movie and just being like, I'm a fan of James Bond, I think it's a bad choice to be like, we're going to make the name of this Quantum and then have the insignia for that organization be a Q, when what I associate with Q is gadgets and Q the character. So I'm saying as a fan, I'm like, I feel, and I know you're like, nah, that's a nitpick. And I'm like, if you're going to be smart about how you're going to approach that, don't call it Quantum. Don't even call it anything, because you didn't have to even say anything in the script. We already get the idea that they are in cahoots. We know there's something spooky going on with these higher ups, one of which has an ear in the prime minister. You know something bad's going on with these characters. I don't think you need to put a label on it.
They could have just kept saying the organization, but I don't care. The fact that it's Quantum, whatever. I have no qualms with that.
Real quick, back to the edits. There's a scene before that scene that I thought was a little weird. There are times in this movie, there are shots that are cut to that I'm like, why did you add that? in that edit when this movie's already like really fast, right? For a movie that they're cutting a lot out, I feel like they cut things in that aren't necessary. Like there is specifically a cutaway shot of a woman filling up a drink. And in any other movie, most movies, if you're doing that, if you're cutting to something, it's important. You need to show why would you cut to something. But when you watch the rest of the scene play out, we never see that glass of alcohol come into play later in that scene. So that makes me feel like, why do we have it in there?
I get what you mean, but this is what I mean. When you're looking for problems, you'll find them. Because that's classically called a cutaway. There's action happening, and then they cut away to something else. There's a stewardess on the flight, and she's like doling out drinks,
it's a
right?
Weird thing to be like, that's what we're going to cut to in this movie.
It'd be weird to cut to the pilot, and he's like picking his nose. That would be weird.
No, but if you're gonna cut away to anybody, you're cutting your reaction to either Felix Leiter,
I think it just shows how in bed
Elvis
Green is with top tier security.
To Nance's point, let's put the snooty hat back on for a second.
We're just hanging out and having drinks, and hey, we scratch your back, we'll scratch yours.
If you need that to mean something, if that cutaway needs to mean something, then obviously there's a heavy emphasis on alcohol and chilling out and like a G5 jet or whatever, and all these four guys are casually talking business that is going to lead to the changing, possibly killing of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, right? And they're just sitting there boozing while they're like, hey, South America's falling like dominoes. Hey, you give us some oil. We'll look the other way on this Bolivian coup, blah, blah, blah. Hey, babe, can I get a whiskey? Yeah, and he's just pouring the whiskey.
Venezuela, Brazil, now Bolivia. With you tied up in the Middle East, South America is falling like dominoes.
Well, we can hardly be expected to do something about a coup we know nothing about.
I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to essentially just have a cutaway. But if you need it to mean something, that's what's going on in the scene, is this casual talk from these scumbags. But are they really scumbags, or is this just the way the world works? And that's ultimately why I think this movie is smart, is because it lives in the real world. Sorry, everybody else around the planet.
Let's go police the world.
Team America has once again pissed off the entire world.
Your countries are doing the same thing. They're all looking out for themselves first and foremost, and then trying to help out where they can. And when it comes to oil, everybody ruthless. Remember, that's why I like Golden Gun, because I'm like, everybody's fighting over the Solace, because we're always in an energy crisis. If the Solace existed, everybody would be cutting each other's throats to get it. So these guys are wheeling and dealing, right? They're getting in bed with a scumbag for a purpose. And we'll talk more on that later. Let's get through the editing segment. The editing is fine in the plane scene until the enemy pilot just suddenly pulls off and explodes. He just zips off into a mountain and explodes. He just zips out and into...
Why is that unclear, though? That's the product of what Bond was doing to him.
That's what I mean. It's unclear. What was Bond doing?
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think those little planes have to have a lot higher speed to maintain being in the air, right?
Okay.
Versus a big plane that has big wings, it can go slower and still stay aloft.
Okay.
So my impression is Bond, it's kind of... Here's Bond, here's the plane. Bond slows way down and then also like gets on top of him and goes into like a crevice between two mountains, right? And then the guy has to like swerve to try to get out from under Bond, but he's too low because Bond has taken them really close to the mountain range.
Again, that's where you need Mathis there to be like, right now he's cutting off his drag. So
he's driving really slow and dropping his altitude.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what I mean. Like maybe the movie's too smart for me at that moment, but another movie, they would have had her up in the cockpit and she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, trust me, I'm cutting off. He's in my drag
We
space.
can fly slower and lower than him.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, Bond's like, okay, well, if I can't outdo him because I don't have guns on this plane, then I might as well go into where I can use my environment. I can use the mountains, basically, as a weapon. And so by going lower, it makes it harder for him to get around because his focus, the guy who's shooting at his focus is just shooting at him. If he's just all focused on that, he might not be focusing on what's going on around him. And so that might be the reason why he has to get out of there when he does. That scene doesn't bother me. That one does not bother me as much.
And I get what you're saying. Bond goes low and Bond's like, I'm going to fly really low and just keep going with it. But Bond's at a disadvantage there because he's so big and cumbersome that a turn for him is difficult, whereas this tiny little plane is shoom, 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 shoom. You know, you can really meander that path. So for the guy to just suddenly peel off, that's where I'm like, wait, what just happened? Why did he just peel off into the wall? If Bond had like nudged him, had the planes touched, and because he's so big that he, you know, that's what diverted his path. That's what I mean. Something that clearly shows it, but it's just as unclear as when Bond throws that hook. It seems like they're covering up something that's unclear with fast editing, so it's gone before you can even question it.
It's like, unclear. What just happened? McCurdy and I interpreted it in different ways, which just goes to show that it's unclear what the intention was.
Again, Mr. Forrester knows his cinema history. He intentionally made this scene. He wanted it with biplanes because he wanted it to be kind of a slight homage to North by Northwest, which is actually one of my favorite movies. But in that movie, there's a scene where the main character, he's like in a cornfield, and then there's this crop duster that comes out of nowhere and it's trying to clip him. And it's very much out of nowhere, very much similar like to the scene where, you know, he's just flying along and then this plane comes out of nowhere.
And then after that is the bar scene.
Move your ass.
Which is fine, nice and brief and to the point. The last action scene is the hotel fire, which starts out with some more of that Cuddy stuff.
You and I had a mutual friend.
And so there are moments, there are some shots where I'm like, but again, on the whole, that scene is Cuddy in the beginning, but then it's clear as to what's going on for the rest of it. But I will backtrack a little bit. I know I said that nothing ever becomes Liam Neeson jumping a fence, but there is one moment that really does feel like Liam Neeson jumping a fence, and that's when Camille is going down the stairs to fight those two soldiers. It's just all over the place. I think if it came down to it, the one that I just don't care for is the boat scene. For me, it just felt like Mark Forster wanted to check that box of his water action scene rather than something that was a little more purposeful. Like, it just feels obligatory. But all the other ones serve a purpose, and I like them, regardless of little pockets of, I wouldn't have cut it that way type of things.